Nick Novacich, longtime friend that we both allowed far too much time between catching up. This 2+ decade officer that rose to the rank chief of police in my hometown of Granite City recently won his first election, becoming the Madison County Coroner. After all of his experience chasing down perpetrators of the most heinous crimes on the region's special task force, Nick now spends his time with the body, with the evidence, in an attempt to help catch the worst of the worst among us. Our conversation ranges from Dexter to Defund the Police to The Punisher and more. We cover a lot of ground in yet another taboo conversation exposed to help elevate understanding and entertain while learning. Let's go. Sync them up.
All right.
Okay. So while it might look like I'm super prepared here with my laptop and everything else, I'm not. I just have a few bullet points.
Okay.
Stay on the mic if you don't mind. Pull it closer. You know, whatever's comfortable. It's all swivelable. Nick Novacich, GC alum as well.
Yep.
How you doing, dude?
I'm good, man. It's great to be here. I'll tell you, coming in and taking a look at the place, I love what you've done with it.
Yeah, there you go.
I really like that picture right there. I feel like
a little monkey.
Yeah, me and that monkey have a lot in common, to be honest with you.
I
feel like that when I'm in a suit.
I think I've told this story a little bit before, but you know my dad, right?
Absolutely.
Before he passed, he had that little solitary life down in, first it was at 4th and State, and then it was at 10th and State, real close to the tracks right there.
Yeah.
And, being a solo operator in an office like that, he had no friends in there. There was no employees. He was the employee, and the boss was golfing. But his friends were all these posters and shit on the wall that my mom started buying him. It was orangutans and chimps and...
Okay.
So I decided, I kind of like monkeys too.
Yeah.
You go to the zoo, right?
Yeah.
Been, obviously.
My wife.
You strike me as a big cat house kind of guy.
I like the big cat house. I like the polar bears, man. I think the polar bears are cool, and my wife was showing me a video here recently of the polar bears getting the opportunity to actually get out and get in real snow instead of artificial snow, and how happy they were.
Yeah.
We were watching that, and I thought, I suddenly felt real bad for the polar bears.
It's one of those things. My family, my wife and kids in particular, especially when the kids were little, they did all to this day, they still do the whole behind the scenes. They're zoo members, and they get to go and, not just feed the rays, but clean the rays or whatever it is, and penguins, etc. And every time she comes back, she's torn. Because she's like, it's so good what they do. It's so good about the education. But at the same time, they're caged.
Exactly.
They're in a box.
Yeah.
I could see you being a polar bear fan. You're kind of a bearish big dude, You you reflect, you look at him, you're like, man, look at those pecs.
I say, look at the size of the feet on that thing.
Right.
One swipe and my head's gone.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I appreciate you coming in here and doing this. We had a pre-chat, which we're just going to continue the pre-chat.
Sounds great.
Nothing different. But you have a unique background, not only from a geographical location, us growing up in the same town, your career background, walking you through law enforcement, your whole life, basically.
Yeah.
And you've recently taken to the political route, but in a position that most people don't ever really think about as oh my God, they're going to run for a position, which is probably pretty smart, right?
You're going to go into politics. It's the best office to go for.
Coroner.
Yeah.
Coroner. So let's start here at the finish line then.
Okay.
You have a career as a policeman. You elevate up. What was your highest rank?
I was colonel, which is the chief of police of the Granite City Police Department.
So you were big boss.
Yeah, I was the big boss.
So you go out on top. At some point, you're probably laying in bed, or you wake up one morning, you're having your coffee, or whatever you do in your solitary time. Explain to me how you go from that to, you know what, I want to be in charge of all the dead people. I'm going to run for coroner.
So, okay.
because
Put it like that, yeah. But, the path was actually laid for me quite a few years ago, many years ago, actually. And to be honest, many years ago instead of a few. I got big with the major case squad. I climbed the ranks, started out as an investigator, started working as a deputy report officer, then became a deputy commander with the major case squad, and now I'm on the board of directors for the major case squad. And with that,
real quick, I might interject here just so we can get clarification. Major case squad of
Greater St. Louis.
Greater St. Louis area.
So just quick backstory on that. The major case squad is comprised of over 500 investigators from the St. Louis metropolitan area. And that consists of Illinois side and Missouri side working together.
So St. Clair, Madison City, St. Louis County. Does it include St. Charles County? Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it reaches out pretty far, and usually you try to send your best of the best investigators to help assist in those investigations because, homicide investigations are obviously the most polarizing thing that law enforcement does. Anytime somebody dies, there's a certain way the community feels about it, and especially whenever it happens in their backyard. If you have a murder, everybody wants to know, what are you doing to make that right, finding the resolution for the family, but at the same time, what are you doing to make the community safer? So in all my years of doing that, I got introduced, through investigations to the coroner's office. And it was always interesting to me because I saw it as part of crime scene, but at the same time, a different animal. It's law enforcement, but it's a different animal because they're conducting investigations, but it's hyper-focused on the body itself. And they start at the body and they work their way out, where with us, a lot of times we would go in, we'd see the body, we'd get as much detail as we could as quickly as possible, and then we went out the doors and we started banging on doors and we started talking to people.
You're looking for the perp.
Yes, we're going on the hunt for the perp, where they're dealing with the body. They're dealing with the actual crime scene itself, and they're trying to figure out obviously everything that led up to it, but then working back with the cause and manner of death and things like that, and then you introduce into the pathologist, and they're doing their thing, and you see all of that and say, man, there's something else out there. There's a whole other side to this that's very intriguing. And I've had several conversations with the now retired coroner of Madison County, Steve Nunn, coming up through the years. We've become very good friends. We're very close. And Steve became a commissioner with the police department, and he was one of my advisors. I mean, he's an old, battle-hardened vet of policing.
So help me understand then, because just as a layman who watches all the crime shows,
stop doing that.
Well, that's like me telling homeowners back in the day, quit watching HGTV.
Yeah, right.
The coroner is always the one in the blue coat with yellow lettering, and then all the cool cops and with the shades all kind of want to make fun of the coroner and like, do your job, we'll see you, let us get the body back, or whatever it is. But walk me through kind of, now in hindsight, when you look back at your own career, when you come into a situation and there's a death, there's a murder, what is the responsibility in the immediate time frame that the coroner plays as far as assisting you in the day as a detective? And are we talking equal footing? Because in a lot of environments, especially law and order and military in particular, there's hierarchy, right?
Yes.
Where does the coroner actually come into play, in that kind of hierarchy of a crime, specifically murder?
Looking back, we always kind of, whenever the coroner showed up, we just let them do their thing. We deferred to them. There wasn't really a hierarchy as far as I was concerned, at least in my eyes. I didn't look at them as just, there they are. Go do your thing. There's the body over there. I never viewed them in that sense, because I knew that they were getting into the minutia of the actual cause and manner of death. and they were going to be able to tell me what kind of round was used. You know, if we don't have any spent casings on the floor and all of the rounds are still contained within the body, they're the ones that are going to be sitting there with the pathologist retrieving those, along with, you know, obviously crime scene technicians and whatnot. But they are going to be our eyes and ears in the pathology suite. And the amount of information and data that they can bring back actually helps you focus your investigation a little better.
Generally speaking, across the spectrum of wherever the municipality is, are coroners usually ex-cops?
No, actually, in Illinois, so you have coroners and you have medical examiners. Medical examiners typically have a medical background. Coroners, as I have started to learn in Illinois, I kind of always just deferred to, yes, they are law enforcement, because my encounters with a coroner's office was predominantly Madison County, and it was Steve Nunn, who was a cop for 26 years.
Right.
Before he was ever the coroner. So I always just kind of had it in my head that it was strictly just a law enforcement job. And I kind of looked at it like, okay, yeah, you know, this is 100% along the same vein. When you start looking throughout Illinois, it's very interesting because the coroners that I've come in contact with, a lot of them are funeral home directors. So, you know, that was their path leading up to becoming coroners. So they're not.
Well, okay, so I'm going to be cynical for a second. Is that almost, is there a potential conflict of interest if the first person on site is the one that has the funeral home for the services to follow?
Oh, I'm sure there's policies in place that doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, but, like lobbyists, right?
Yeah, exactly, like a lobbyist. But yeah, I could see where there's the potential for it. I would like to think that doesn't happen. Again, I'm new to this game.
Sure.
I started December 2nd, so I've met them in passing. I haven't met anybody that I think has an alternative agenda or has a nefarious nature of any way, shape, or form. But
let me ask you more of a impact question, like personal, optical. You know, maybe your gut or your mindset. The difference between being a detective or you know whatever your rank was at the time, upon entering into a crime scene and seeing a body, right, and having kind of the detective mindset to immediately like, okay, let's figure out is perp, right? That's your focus.
I was always, and I'll speak for myself.
Well, real quick, let me. The question is, do you react differently now when you walk into a crime scene and you see the body with the coroner hat on? You know, because now you're not the one that's going to go pound the pavement looking for, you know, the individual responsible. Now you are part of like the scientific process. Do you look at those bodies differently? Is the question?
Oh, absolutely. You know, before, like I said, I wasn't really concerned with the cause or manner of death at the onset of the case. As soon as we arrived on scene, all I could think about was, okay, I'm gonna solve this tomorrow. I'm gonna have this done, because you know they always talk about the first 24 or first 48 being the most vital.
I've seen that show.
You've seen that show, but I was always like, man, I want to be the guy that breaks that case before everybody else. You know, I want to be able to walk into the room and say, this is what happened. Well, obviously that's a little bit of ego coming into play, and
sure.
Over the years I've calmed down. But you know, as a young detective, especially, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to find out who did it, go find them, put them in handcuffs, throw them in jail. I mean, that was the only goal. But now, from wearing this hat and looking at it from this perspective, my goal now is to gather as much information as possible and to make the detective's job not only easier, but a lot more efficient.
In hindsight, you know, obviously you've only been doing it now, you know, briefly, but you've been around it your whole career. Yeah. Do you see it as a kind of like a pseudo tortoise and hare philosophy, where we all know the story, we all read it as kids, the tortoise ultimately wins. Do you try to instill maybe more patience in the because you're not their boss anymore, right?
Right.
You are a peer. But is it hard to not, like, maybe, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's, or is it, brain body separation? You guys do your job. I used to do your job. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. You are all good. But now you approach it differently, a little bit more methodically.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Tortoise and a hare is a great analogy to use there. I like that. It is a longer process because we're dealing with pathologists, and sometimes toxicology doesn't come back as fast as you would like it to, and that's out of our hands. You can ask for it to be expedited, but that doesn't always happen. So sometimes you have most of the pieces of the puzzle, you don't have them all, so it does slow everything down. There is less of a sense of urgency in the coroner's office as a whole, I will say that. The police department, it seemed like it was constant chaos. Something was constantly going on. Be on my way into work, my phone would ring, hey, we've got an armed barricaded gunman over here. We need you, this is what we got going on. It was never we need you to respond, but as the boss, you need to show up. And you don't show up because you're going to go there and take the scene over.
Well, all crime is your crime.
Correct. You own it all. But you're not going to show up and take it away from whoever is already running the show. Yeah. But hey, I'm here. What do you need? I'm here in a support capacity.
So you said something earlier that murder in particular has an effect. It has an outward effect on a community, and that made me think. And again, given I don't take that I don't lead with notes, I took a quick note on that because. Okay. And it made me think of the layers of an onion, and I called it in my notes here, quote, rings of murder, community / block / family / the perp, because every murder really affects each of those areas to a degree in largely different ways.
Absolutely.
For the most part, communities, and I hate to say this because it's a little shallow towards the individuals that are directly involved, but it's like, we really don't want the black eye. We don't want dead people in our community because we want everybody to feel safe, right? But whereas on the far other end, you have this family, it's like, we just lost somebody brutally.
Oh, absolutely.
So my question is, in the coroner role specifically, in potentially evaluating the different effects of the murder, the community is always number one because everybody's like, oh my God, somebody's on the loose, or everybody's afraid. So you want to temper the fear and obviously, make everybody safe again. But as the coroner, you're also probably much closer to the spouse or the remaining family members. Mm-hmm. Is it a different hat that you have to wear, by carrying a different badge?
Absolutely.
What's that like?
In our brief conversation prior to it, you brought up empathy. And whenever you're dealing with these families, they're going through the most traumatic experience of their life. I mean, they just lost a loved one in a oftentimes heinous manner, and it really does put them in some kind of spiral. Mm-hmm. Your job not only is to help them resolve this matter as quickly and efficiently as possible, but it's also to try to keep them in a place where, one, they don't retaliate, because sometimes that happens when there's a murder. Somebody decides they're going to be a vigilante and go out on their own and go hunting.
Human nature.
Has happened. But also, at the end of it, you want them to be in the best headspace they can possibly be in by the time they're done with this. And I will say that figuring out the cause and manner of death is the driving force of the office. But I will say the one thing that I've seen since I've been there that makes me really appreciate the office is how they handle the families. And that's the hardest thing. I think that is the thing that takes a larger toll on the investigators in the coroner's office, and the deputy coroners and the senior investigator and the chief investigator and the chief deputy.
Was that something that none prepped you for prior?
We had,
or are you realizing it in real time that maybe it was always there, but now maybe?
Yeah, I'm hyper focused on it now. I caught a sniff of it, I guess, coming along and talking in conversations with Steve and talking about the family. But as I was going through the political process too, I did a lot of research. Mm-hmm. I went to school on what it takes to be a coroner, what the expected, what's expected of a coroner in a day-to-day activity. And I just kept reading about families and families and families. And it made me think, I've got to do everything I can to not only give my people the tools that they have to help these families along, but I've also got to help my people along because they're carrying the baggage.
Okay, so I am ecstatic that you put it that way because for years, probably decades, in having, quote, political conversations and debates, especially since Ferguson, talking about the pressures and stress that cops are under, specifically when they are constantly walking into environments in which the most heinous acts humans can enact occur, and then the general public is just basically expecting them to, quote, do their job. And that's not realistic. I mean, you're kind of alluding to it right now because those images don't go away, right?
No, they do not.
I can't imagine, with all due respect, I have no idea what's in the back end of your brain after however many decades of doing it. And I feel for you from the standpoint of, the other side of the argument are where people are like, the whole defund argument, or let's put more social workers in there. Whatever it is. But what I'm hearing from you is like this understanding and this realization that to understand the human element more within this process is something that you are realizing is going to be a constant learning curve.
Yeah, as I was coming up through the ranks and I was becoming more responsible, for more and more people, it became very apparent to me that one, nothing is about me. I'm just the guy who tells this person, hey, this is what happened. I need you to go deal with it. Report back to me. At the end of the day, I'm a figurehead. Most of the time, I'm probably in the way. But, they're the ones out there.
That's that polar bear thing.
That's a polar bear thing, big and in the way. But, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are out there and they're doing it. And as I was coming up through the years and through the ranks and becoming more responsible for more people and their livelihood, and not just their livelihood, but ensuring that they got home to their loved ones at the end of a shift, I have developed empathy. When I was young and full of piss and vinegar, I was a lot more callous, I would say. Cavalier in my attitude because, I'm like any young kid. I'm invincible.
Well, you're also surrounded by individuals, and I know a lot of these individuals too because we're of an age in which 9/11 changed things from a first responder perspective.
Absolutely.
And it's not just so much the perspective of the role of cops and firefighters in particular, but I think the byproduct that nobody really talks about is since 2001, 2002 really, and the start of the Iraq War, what we have is a flood of individuals that did their tours, that have come back.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I know where you're going with this.
There's a mindset. I obviously, I'm not naming names, and I know you won't either, but had very direct, dark conversations with individuals that they come back, and the reality is, what's the movie where the dude's standing in the grocery store and he's like, "Fuck, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't reintegrate." What was that? What was that movie? It was with
Jeremy Renner.
Yes.
Oh no.
We'll look it up. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And in talking,
Hurt Locker.
Yes.
The Hurt Locker.
And it's because of what they saw. It's because of what they experienced. And so now you have these individuals that really proliferated everywhere.
Right.
We know firsthand they're in our backyard. They were in every group, municipality. And then the chaos, to a degree, doesn't slow down, potentially picks up. It's just a different landscape.
Yeah.
Now it's your community. So here's my question.
Okay.
And this is not a political question. This is just a human question.
Yeah. I prefer those. Thank you.
I'll ask those later. Do you feel there needs to be a more concerted effort to integrate that aspect of it? Understanding empathy, understanding natural responses in the human body, in the brain, and in the heart when individuals are constantly presented with the worst man can do.
Yes, absolutely I do. And when I was with the Granite City Police Department, we started a program, and I caught wind of it from another couple of the area chiefs that were already doing it, and it was a tremendous idea. But so the culture has always been, it's the same in the military. If you go to a therapist, you're weak. Okay, that was always the culture. Like, the whole be a man, push it down, get back to work, quit crying.
It's just bad guys.
Yeah, just do your thing. You're here for a job, go do your job and shut up. That has changed tremendously. And I think it comes from the fact that education has been pushed in law enforcement. There was a time when you got guys, and I'm not discrediting anybody who's walking around with just a high school diploma.
Sure.
But you have had people who had the opportunity to get a college education now. And there's a lot more leaders in place that have had college classes, a lot of them in sociology, a lot of them in psychology. So they were introduced to things that they probably would have never heard of just going, to their 9 to 5 or whatever they were working and hanging out with their buddies at the bar afterwards. It's just it's not feasible for them to come in contact with those types of educations.
Yep.
Well, now you have these people in place that have been exposed to that had the opportunity to get an education, think outside the box a little bit. I'm not saying that colleges and universities are the greatest places in the world, but they are a place where you gain life experience.
Yeah, critical thinking.
Critical thinking. The military is a great place. You learn life experience. You learn order and chaos, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So, all of that brings a lot to the table. And I think that the fact that law enforcement as a whole, it can be argued, is more educated now than it's ever been. People are paying attention to those things. This is a conversation that comes up now. So what we started doing in Granite City, and like I said,
Wait, let me ask you a quick question, interject. Do you believe that these things are happening because you truly believe that that is the path forward to a better outcome? Or do you believe that these things are happening because society is forcing the narrative faster?
No, I don't think that at all. I think that there's been a cultural shift in law enforcement to be more considerate of one another. Everything starts in-house. Mm-hmm. How they treat each other. Do they treat each other like a family? And that was a big thing I always pushed at the PD was I want us to look at each other like your brother, your sister. Maybe some of them are first cousins. You don't,
right.
You don't see them as often.
No, your step.
They're still your family. But,
your name is still in the hat when we draw names at the Christmas party.
Yeah. We're still going to invite you to the party.
There you go.
But, I always wanted an environment that felt like a family because when they treat each other with love and respect, when they go out into the community, it's already being ingrained in them. They don't even realize they're doing it. So to piggyback off of that, what I was going to say is that there was a couple of chiefs that had implemented a program where they were encouraging their officers and incentivized their officers to actually speak to therapists. And they were taking away the stigma of, if you go to a therapist, you're a wimp. They were trying to remove that stigma. And when I heard that, I thought, why the hell didn't I think of this? So what we did in Granite was we partnered up with a couple of social workers who said that they would make themselves available for our people to come in and talk to them. And for every, we were providing them comp time. So if they would go and see a therapist, I can't remember the hours, but it maxed out at 8 hours. So basically you would get one of your short days a year off if you did this. And while yes, it is in a roundabout way a strain on the taxpayer because they're paying.
I don't think there'd be a taxpayer complaining. I mean, I take that back. All taxpayers complain.
Somebody's going to complain. But at the end of the day, you're getting a better law enforcement officer who's in a better place mentally and is more capable of handling your traumatic incident, the chaos that you're going through, and keeping their shit together so that they can help you navigate through it.
See, that seems to me like a logical, elevated solution, and I think of just little things. Okay, so let's say you got an hour and a half a day of calisthenics, gym, whatever. Integrating 15 minutes of Zen time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
it
seems as if there's a lot of paths of least resistance. I tell you what, we're going to dig into this more. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're gonna peel this onion back a little bit further.
All right,
be right back.
Thanks.
Okay, I want to pick that back up. Kind of this whole idea of integrating more, quote, social services / treatments / practice / habits. Because I was thinking, I referenced the reality of the post 9/11 days as far as what that meant to the workforce. Where not all, clearly not all, but large chunks of vets coming back, entering, into domestic civil life. A lot of them became cops, and there's a mindset there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a lot of individuals that have never left their hometown, probably never left their own zip code, that are just like the ideology or the idea of becoming a cop. Maybe it was a family thing. Maybe it's just they want to go catch bad guys or do good things or whatever they want to do. And so I had this question. Because it feels as if, and I'm sure that you guys kind of assign people accordingly, but should there be more of an effort to evaluate more broadly all police officers at all ages regularly and create almost like tiers? You know what I'm saying? So for those that are dealing with the heinous of the heinous crimes, the most violent murder, brutal rape, etc., and able to manage that. Because when you think of a first responder, to me, it's universal. Somebody's in their car and they get a call and they go, and you could have a list of 1,000 different things that could have happened at said address. And I get that there's a logistical issue in trying to potentially tier, like, oh my God, this is a shots fired, person down. Well, they're our A group, right? Is there a way, or currently, or do you think could be improved upon moving forward, to better manage the people, to put them in situations more often in which they're mentally capable of handling, and more importantly, tailing off of what we talked about right at the break, recovering from these types of instances?
Sure. So there are training programs that are out there, and we used to use them a lot at the PD, especially with our special response team, our warrant service guys that were putting themselves at risk at arguably a higher level on a more regular basis. We do a thing called stress inoculation. And with that, what we would do is create the most chaotic scene for them to be dealing with. And we would use simunitions. It was as close as we could get to the real thing as possible. But we would have loud music blaring, lights flashing, people screaming. We went as far as to get fake blood and have it squirting all over the place. Put a baby into anything and it immediately becomes stressful to any situation.
Yep.
And we would put them in these scenarios and make them navigate through those scenarios, find the resolution, and then we would have a debrief afterwards. And through the repetitive nature of that, and the time will tell on this is if it really works or not, but I know that there's been studies done that say it does work. I'm more of show me, prove it to me, let me see it with my own eyes before I fully believe it. But
are you saying that the training enables these individuals to handle the situations better? And if that is the case, are you defining better as not freaking out as much, or recovering, not becoming too robotic?
Column A and column B. By putting them in a more stressful situation whenever they come into the real world situation, and obviously, you can't plan for every situation they're ever going to walk into, but you try to make the scenarios as close to reality as you possibly can. When they get into that room, they've seen this or something like it already in training. I think that does better equip them to not, one, be a robot on the scene, but two, to process things a little faster. We always talked about a thing called an OODA loop, and the OODA loop is something that everybody goes through it. You almost get in a car crash, and you slam on your brakes right at that split second where you just missed that person.
Right.
Your body has a physical response, a chemical response, a hormonal response.
Adrenaline.
Yeah, absolutely. And your mind kind of just goes blank for a minute, and you have a hard time zeroing back in and moving forward with your day. There's a little time there that you're a mess. And high stress situations are very similar to that. You're all of a sudden thrown into chaos. And if you haven't had the opportunity to be put into an OODA loop, so to speak, prior to that, then you're going to respond probably in a negative manner. But if you've had exposure to that, and you've been given a task and you had to complete a task while your stress was through the roof, I feel like that makes the officers more equipped when they go into a similar situation in the real world to, be as professional as possible and not basically lose their shit.
So I want to go to the other end of the spectrum of this kind of process, the post game, so to speak.
Okay.
When I say the word desensitized, as it pertains to officers, what does that mean to you?
Well, it can mean a laundry list of things. In this context, I would assume that you're implying that this could be a good or a bad thing, and I'm gonna.
Well, this is not a gotcha question. This is like
no.
Because I personally believe that there's absolutely good and bad in that term as it pertains to this subject matter.
I think if you look at it from the viewpoint that the desensitization of it allows them to not only deal with that situation in real time and be done with it afterwards, but then
which is a benefit.
They have time to get back in their car, they have time to reflect, learn from it, but they're also not still way up here.
Yeah.
They have a tendency to come down faster, which in the case desensitization would be, to desensitize somebody would be much better. But to desensitize them to the point where they don't care, I don't feel like if that's what you were thinking, I don't feel like that.
Well, you were the boss. You were the big boss, and you've been on this task force, and you know a lot of people that have been, spent their whole lives in those environments that are, the most brutal. When you see an individual, and again, I'm going to just make a generic individual A.
Okay.
Do you have the ability at this point in your career to look at somebody and, maybe it's, not necessarily the next 24 or 48 after an event, but maybe it's like 30 days later or 6 months later. Have you witnessed kind of individuals that have been kind of whitewashed of reaction, that have been completely desensitized to the point where that there is potentially, that's not healthy either? And assuming, and if yes, how does it make you feel? What do you think when you look at somebody that is potentially drained of that empathy, that sensitivity due to this desensitization, desensitized process?
Let's circle back to that part. I do want to address the first question. I'm going to say as a whole, no. I know that there are people who react in different ways. Mm-hmm. Some of them do wear their hearts on their sleeve. Some of them, I've seen officers cry. But more times than not, you'll see them when they get back amongst their group making jokes, cutting up, picking on each other. Mm-hmm. Now, that's doing two things. One, that's getting them back into a social environment where they're interacting with other people. But it's also a defense mechanism. You know, people don't realize that sometimes I know cops have been caught doing this a million times on camera where they're on a crime scene and they're laughing. Is it professional? No. But you've got to understand, at the end of the day, that's part of a coping mechanism.
Sure.
That's a tactic for them to be able to keep going to those kinds of scenes and keep experiencing those experiences and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and the problem in that situation, I mean, I can completely understand that, you know, but you know, that perception is reality.
Absolutely.
It becomes, you know, a little bit of a noose on the situation.
It does. You know, and it's unfortunate because, you know, unless you've ever been in that situation, you really don't understand why they're reacting the way they are. But people who have been in that situation and they see officers on a scene and they might be cutting up a little bit, they immediately know, yeah, that's bothering them, and they're trying to get through it. Like it's weighing on them in some way, shape, or form, and this is their way of trying to get through it and lean on their friends.
Let me shift it up a little bit, because earlier we were talking about, I brought up the whole 9/11 as kind of a starting line, so to speak, as it pertains to cops, first responders, and kind of the optics. And if you fast forward a little bit, I would say the next major event that shifted narrative would be Ferguson.
Yeah.
Because between 9/11 and then, not that there weren't news or events that occurred, you know, officer-involved shootings or whatever it is. I mean, it happened. That's the news cycle.
Right.
But Ferguson was different. You know, and I think that we've all seen it in real time, not only on the ground, but in our politics, et cetera. I just want to get your take on, you know, reflecting back to 2014, I think it was the year 2000. Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, let's push a little further back to the early 90s with Rodney King.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Rodney King, I think, was the first time that you saw people feeling some kind of way about police.
Oh, totally.
They were really ticked off at the police. They wanted, you know, these corrupt cops to be off the streets. You know, they wanted us all burned at the stake. And move forward to 9/11, I worked that night. So I had worked the night before, and I'm sound asleep. I'm living in a small little house on Primrose and Granite, and my phone is just ringing off the hook.
You were playing drums all night, weren't you?
Yeah, right. No, I was actually working. I wasn't having fun. I was actually working. So it's like around 10 o'clock in the morning. My mother's calling me. Now, my dad, his health has had his peaks and valleys over the years, and I thought, oh, shit, this is the call. So I wake up, and I'm, you know, you're in that first couple hours of sleep, so you really don't even know where the hell you're at. And my mom goes, turn the TV on right now.
Yeah, the world's coming to an end.
And I turned the TV on, and I saw the chaos. I thought, oh, okay. I have no idea how to even, mentally, I couldn't even process it. It was just so horrific that it immediately, it elicited enough of a response out of me that I wasn't able to go back to sleep. So 7 p.m., I got to go back into work. So I try to sleep. It doesn't really work. I'm watching the news in the background. I should have just shut the TV off, but I didn't. And I'm at Quick Trip after roll call. And it was a common thing. We'd always go to Quick Trip, grab a cup of coffee, you get your car situated for the night because that's your office for the day. Mm-hmm. And, you know, grab a couple of snacks for the road, some sunflower seeds, whatever your poison is.
Yeah.
Monster Energy drink really wasn't a thing back then. We drank a lot of coffee. But a lady walked up to me that I'd never met in my life. And she says, "Can I hug you?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took me back because, you know, in all your training, you're like, oh, you never let anybody get their arms around you. But I could tell by her demeanor that it wasn't coming from a place of malice. You know, she genuinely wanted to give me a hug. Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely. And that started the train rolling for me, so to speak, because I saw for months thereafter, we love police, and Rudy Giuliani's out there on the ball diamond with NYPD and NYFD on a hat, on a Yankees hat, and all that stuff, and it just, everything was going on in the world where everybody seemed to really love law enforcement.
I mean, even Steve Buscemi was a famous fireman at the time.
Yeah, got out and actually worked again. Yeah, right. So then you fast forward to Ferguson.
Well, let's go back for a second, because you brought up a great point, because we are obviously very close in age, grew up in the same kind of generation, and I was kind of reminding myself, did a quick peek. Rodney King, the date of the event was in 1991. The trial wasn't until 1993. The riots were on and off in 92. And Rodney King, how that played out and what happened to the truck driver and the riots, and just kind of the way that the PR machine moved from the police side, LAPD. It felt, as a high school kid, I knew at the time, like, this was not thought out. This is very combative. This is very, but. And it kind of like it created a narrative during the 90s that everybody always wanted to talk about Rodney King, NWA, and everybody made records about it.
Oh yeah,
right. And that was our childhood as it pertained to the public and the cops. And it just never, as much as it was present, I don't think it was on the forefront.
No.
Most communities, Granite City, growing up, all the cops that we knew then, even as other kids and the liberal groups in town, or the hardcore people that want police reform. Well, police reform didn't even exist as a term in the 90s. It just kind of happened, but it was independent of the relationship between most communities and the police. And then 9/11, everybody started to love and wanted to hug. And so I just kind of wanted to frame this like over a 20-year time frame, because in essence 93 was trial and go all the way up to Ferguson.
Absolutely.
It was, I would say it was okay in the 90s in spite of LA. It was really good in the 2000s because of 9/11 and then Michael Brown and Ferguson.
Yes.
So I just wanted to paint a timeline there as I viewed it, and I want to hear kind of your take on that date, that event.
So, like anything else, law enforcement is a profession that has ebbed and flowed with the community. I mean, there's been times like we were talking about with 9/11 where we were adored, people were good to us, everybody wanted to buy you a sandwich or something, and then... Not
you, man. You ate. You're a big dude.
I
didn't buy you burger.
I ain't getting you no triple cheeseburger.
Hell no. No, go ahead, man. I digress.
That's all right. You fast forward to Ferguson, and I'm going to speak as a Granite City police officer here, because that was my home, and I was working during all of that. I was on patrol when all this happened. From a world perspective, it seemed like everybody was anti-police. The world was coming to an end for cops, except for one little community. Granite City, for whatever reason, was a geographic anomaly during all of this. Our citizens never, to me, seemed to waver from liking us. We were treated very well during that period, which I think definitely helped my officers, because we didn't experience a huge mass exodus that some police departments did during that time period. But, it was one of those things where I was watching just barbs being thrown left and right at law enforcement, and in Granted, it just wasn't happening.
Let me play devil's advocate, not because I want to create a debate, but I want to maybe point out kind of the optics, because at the time I was living, I was in Webster. We had been living in Webster for a while. Obviously, family was still around at that time, coming back and forth. And having left, I lived in Chicago for a number of years, just completely different environments, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I looked at it, my initial take on a lot of the reaction from Granite City in particular, but a lot of other, quote, small town America, I viewed it simplistically, not as a cop versus public thing, but Ferguson was, because of the coverage and because of the community and because of the demographics, it was largely a race thing.
Yeah.
And communities that do not have diversity like that or larger populations, you tended to see, not, in my opinion, I didn't see it necessarily as support for cops first, but it was a subtle, I'm not going to say it, but that's not my community.
Right. No, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. That's exactly what was going on. And because Granite is predominantly white and it's, and it's old blue collar, middle class people, they weren't going to get involved in all of that stuff because it wasn't their fight.
No, they viewed it as, you're burning your own. It was a little bit more dismissive, and I think that the police community, because obviously I knew you guys, I knew Parky, the rest, and a lot of cops in town come back, go to Jake's or wherever and run into and see, or Park Grill, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's still buddies because we all grew up together.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like this delineation between authority and public because you guys were part of the public that are now part of the authority.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. I've talked about this a lot with friends through the years. And like I said, law enforcement does ebb and flow with favor. But, one of the things is people have to remember that there's, at this time right now, over 700,000 cops. That's not including federal agents. So,
nationally?
Yes.
Is that the number?
So
okay.
Federal agents, you're looking at about, I think it's like 1.2 total between local, state, county, and federal municipality.
Where does that compare historically? Is that
is
that a growing number? Is that a flat line, decreased? Do you know?
I actually looked that up, and because I thought we probably would talk about this at some point. There was a time when the numbers in law enforcement were down. Around Ferguson, you did see some people leave, but for the most part, it has stayed relatively flat. It might have decreased by 100,000 here and there every once in a while, but for the most part, it has stayed relatively flat, and actually, it's ticking up right now. So law enforcement is actually growing again.
What do you attribute that to? And let me just throw out some potentials. Is it the, quote, job itself? Is it the brand or the identity? Is it is it lack of jobs elsewhere? Is it good pay? Is it been what do you think is attributing to it? If you had to rank the causes, why are more people entering into law enforcement at a time where it still feels more divisive than not?
Well, I mean, one, at least in Illinois, it pays very well. Missouri doesn't pay as well. These guys get the fuzzy end of the lollipop over here. But, I mean, that's obviously part of it. You're looking at it's a stable profession. I mean, it's one of those that, layoffs do happen, but they're few and far between. They're very rare. You have health insurance, you have life insurance, you have everything comes with that you get your legacy package, so to speak. Everything comes with that when you get a job as a police officer.
That's a fair trade when you're asked to walk through the door and potentially get shot.
Well, I 100% agree. But when people are looking at, hey, I need a big boy job, I need a big girl job. I got to find myself my profession, not just my job, but my profession that's going to carry me through to retirement. What is going to be a consistent job that I know is never going away? Law enforcement is one of the big ones.
Let's get back to Ferguson a little bit because I want to dissect some of the narratives around it. Okay. We'll play a little word game here. Defund the police. What does that mean to you?
To defund the police, I think, in the way that it was being presented, initial reaction was that they were going to try to lower our numbers, which in my mind provides less safety and security for the neighbors, the community, the citizens. I think it's was a horrible idea, simply because, whenever you pick up the phone and dial 911, you want a response. If there's less of us per capita, per community, because typically departments are built around the size of their community.
Right.
So if you have less officers that can respond, you have more people at risk. So to me, when I look at it from that viewpoint, it was appalling to hear.
So let me get your take on this then, because throughout that time, for me personally, I'm non-party affiliated. Recently, I definitely have been. It's easier to say I'm less Trump than I am pro anything else.
Sure.
But going back to that time frame, the Defund the Police movement, to me, my gut reaction when that was being rolled out was that this is the stupidest PR move ever. Whoever wrote that down and said this is let's make posters should never ever write a letter in their life again. Because when I did talk to some powers that be, some consultants that are behind the curtain, more of the Oz's on the center left side of the aisle, the intention was, let's just approach how we fund this and manage the optics from even as simple as a gear standpoint and how we roll that out. And let's manage the education. Let's actually look at, as much as defund was the first word, let's look at increasing pay, increasing benefits so that we can get, quote, better cops. There was a whole bunch of things that were occurring that were intended to let's make this system better. But
which is fine. I have no problem with making a system better.
Right. But defund the police became the narrative. It became the exclusive be-all, end-all. It's not gone away. It's dissipated for sure. I don't think anybody could deny that. I mean, even when you have 50, 75, 100-year-old blue towns where mayors are like, we're not defunding the police. We're gonna give them more money. I think we're seeing the end of that road. Post Ferguson now, for you, do you think do you believe we've made progress? A, question one, and part B is, what does that even look like as far as addressing, quote, defund the police and the narrative around what happened?
So when you talk about defunding the police, another thing that we didn't get the whole thing out there.
Hey, you know what, real quick?
Yes.
I'm going to bring us right back here. 2 seconds. So before the break, before I hastily rushed out because I'm not really a pro. I'm not a pro, period. I forgot to format the disc before, so long story short, I made room so we don't lose any of this.
Okay, cool.
We were talking about kind of that post Ferguson, that defund, and kind of this moving forward. Let me just shift into
Can we finish real quick what we were talking about? Because
absolutely.
There's another component to defund the police, and oftentimes people don't think about this because they're not dealing with it. But one of the things that happens when a police department's budget shrinks is not just the possibility of losing officers on the street, but usually the first thing that goes is ancillary training. So anything that would help them get better at their job in some way, shape, or form.
De-escalation, et cetera, et cetera.
Some of the stuff, which ended up being mandates anyway. But some of the training that we were sending them to that wasn't the mainstream training that was making them better officers immediately gets cut. So in essence, what you do is you take away the opportunity to expose these officers to better training, and you just get what you got. And I think, again, that's another reason why defunding the police was a horrific idea.
Do you think it's fair to say, though, because you know how I feel about that terminology, period. It's stupid. On the flip side, though, in America, we tend to be, what is it, Newton's third law, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. the hyper push, and I'm not saying it came from the police community directly, but like the whole thin blue line, the whole Terminator, the whole
Punisher sticker.
Yeah, thank
you. Get me
you.
started on that.
Yeah, bedazzled jeans and a Punisher truck, who is also your, the local cop. That the optics of that. How does that side? What does that make you think / feel in hindsight, knowing that narrative also, which one didn't represent the vast majority of officers across the country,
right?
But two, it did fuel the fire the same way defund the police did.
Sure, yeah, and it's like anytime you have two opposing forces, they're both going to yell the loudest, and whoever feels like they yell louder than that person, regardless if what they're saying is even remotely true or accurate,
right?
They feel like, well, I won because I was louder. Well, that's never the case. I don't care who's yelling. It's never. You're not making your point any better by yelling. I was never a fan of, I never even thought about the bedazzled jeans thing, but the one that always resonated with me,
what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But the thing that always resonated with me in a very negative manner was the Punisher sticker. Okay? I love the Punisher. Great TV show. I loved it when Chris Kyle and the SEALs were using it. For me, Chris Kyle is worthy of that. I'm not saying that police officers aren't worthy of something. That's not where I'm going with this. Where I am going with this is that creates not only an optic, but a potential for a mindset that I'm the Punisher. Well, we all know Frank Castle doesn't do things that are kosher by the book. He's a criminal.
Look, in full transparency, Dexter is one of my favorite humans on the face of this planet.
Sure, but
and I'm not culpable.
Do you want to emulate Dexter? let's.
Well, no,
on a Tuesday, maybe.
We're still recording. Let's talk about this in lunch.
Right. So, I always found that to be inappropriate. Is probably the best way to put it. It creates a mindset that you're some sort of hard-ass Terminator. You're going to go out and beat everybody up. Well, if anybody's done real police work in their lifetime, you'll find that more times than not, you're actually more of a social worker.
Yeah.
You're a member of the community who's out there dealing with probably your neighbors, because a lot of us live where we work. You're dealing with people that you would deal with any other day and coming in contact with them in a very civil manner. But there are a handful that, they give it to you. You're going to have to give it back. You got to be prepared to give it back. But you shouldn't actively be out there looking for that. And that I saw that, and I always thought,
this is against your own self-interest.
Yeah, it really is.
Because
it's a terrible idea.
You can look at both of those narratives, and you look at the emblems and the sayings and the slogans and the stickers, and you could argue that both, in this attempt to battle one another, they completely hurt opportunity at moving and improving their own self-interests.
Absolutely. If they would have, instead of wasting time coming up with cool little slogans and cool little T-shirts and all this stuff, if they had come together as a community and had a conversation, they probably would have gotten a lot farther down the road a lot faster.
I always think about Ferguson, too, through the lens of we talked about this before we jumped on at the beginning, root cause, right? Mm-hmm. The whole Michael Brown experience, to me, that was the get out of jail free card excuse for the fallout. Because let's be clear, the vast majority of these communities, Ferguson included, you have decades, generations of increasing poverty, decreasing jobs, increasing poor healthcare outcomes, crime. Everything is up. Now, again, there's those people that are going to just be haters and be like, well, that's your own community. You did it to yourself. No, there's bigger things at play here.
Right.
We're talking, institutional redlining. We're talking about lack of capital. We're talking, we're just talking about globalization. These jobs are going elsewhere, and these communities are suffering. So then you have this pyre of, pile of, little twigs, and Michael Brown's situation in Ferguson just threw all that fuel right on top of it. And then on the flip side, you have this, you have the first responder community who services these communities in particular, or just declining communities in general. Just lack of a better term, they're declining communities. Be it, Granite City would be one. I mean, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have the town has a decreasing population.
Yes.
It has had manufacturing job loss at a very, very high rate. It has had an increase of low wage jobs, some stagnation in the real estate market, et cetera, right? And you have the first responder community that is in the community that is now part of it that is also just getting frustrated, right? So you have this two trains hitting each other. And I just wonder where we are now, because in having just that brief, stepping on the soapbox for a second here.
Sure.
I just feel like we tend to look at the issue through a binary lens, right or wrong, good or bad, whatever you want to say. But I don't hear anybody from any of the camps saying, hold on, look, all of this is true. Everything that you guys are feeling, you guys being literally plural for both sides of the fence here, you both have standing here. Where do you see law enforcement's role in attempting to better bridge that gap? If we can agree that both sides are at fault from a narrative perspective.
Well, and I think I said that whenever I was talking about the Punisher sticker and and I was saying if they wouldn't have wasted time on all of that narrative and they would have just come together to come up with a solution, we would have been a lot further down the road a lot faster. When it comes to building a community's trust and a relationship, it starts with the kids. I mean, I think that
I love that.
The best way to actually integrate police into the lives of our citizens in a positive manner is by interacting with the children.
With all due respect to our parents' generation, let's be honest with ourselves, baby boomers are long gone. You are not going to re-educate or reacclimate or reintegrate that generation into kind of a new world order, right. Given the trials and tribulations that a lot of these communities have right now. So when you talk about kids, give us some ideas. Because you're an ideas guy. I know, even though it's rare and very far between conversations, I know that you tend to be a little bit more zen than most within the field that you are. Give us some of the ideas that you think about as far as how do you reach kids or young communities to help bridge that gap?
The best place to start is in the schools. I'm a huge proponent of the SRO program. I will just say we've got a guy right now, and all of our SROs are outstanding, but I'm going to highlight one.
SROs, for those that don't know. School
resource officers, I apologize. We have one individual right now who's at our middle school in Granite, and he was a teacher prior to being a policeman, which gives him a leg up, I think, because he already had an idea how to navigate that world. But then he comes from it now. He comes to it now from a law enforcement perspective. So he brings a little bit of yin to the yang, so to speak. With that said, he was also a very accomplished wrestler growing up. He is now coaching the junior high wrestling team.
As the SRO.
Yes. So he's the school resource officer in the school, also coaching the wrestling team. He wears his uniform. He came to me one time and he said, I'm going to ask for forgiveness on something I should have asked permission for. And I said, okay, what is it?
He wears a singlet as a SRO?
It's got a big badge on it. No.
Talk about the Punisher.
Yeah, what's going on? No. Yeah, you just got me on a tangent with baby oil and everything else. Crazy wrestlers. But no, he said, look, I've been going straight from work to coach wrestling, and I've been doing it in my uniform. And I've actually coached a meet in uniform. And I go, I love it. I said, that is fantastic. I said, the kids are getting an opportunity to interact with a police officer who has the biggest heart in the world. I mean, he's a special guy. He really is. But they're getting to see him in a setting that is positive. It's not coming and hauling dad away or hauling mom away or dragging him out of the car. It's nothing like that. They're getting, as I say, whenever you're talking about, anytime you have to discipline anybody at work, my mantra has always been, I want to praise them 10 times before I have to discipline them. That way, if you have to slap them,
Yep.
You've praised them 10 times. You've told them, hey, you did a great job on that, or hey, here's a commendation, or here's a recognition or something.
Let me toss this past you real quick, though, in regards to SROs, in regards to schools in particular, because I think about this all the time. And I saw the post recently in Granite City where there was huge celebration over the integration of metal detectors at the high school.
Yeah.
My gut reaction to those things, the constant, especially here in Missouri, because in Missouri, every single day, Jeff City, man, they want every teacher pack in, and I mean, it's a different mindset in Missouri.
It really is.
But here's where I go with this. I think back to our time as students. There's no metal detectors. There's no SROs. There's not even hall monitors half the time, right? And I think of the time, and I get it. Everybody listening here, all two of you are like,
thank you, by the way.
Okay, Grandpa, whatever, times have changed. But as much as you clearly are proud of the advancements of SROs and trying to make that the best possible scenario, let me just ask you, would the best scenario be no need?
Oh, yeah, but unfortunately, that's never going to happen. I apologize.
Do you believe that it's never going to happen?
I believe that nobody knows how to punch each other anymore. When we were growing up, and we'll just go back to our days, you and I get mad at each other. I punch you in the face. You punch me in the face. The next day, we're probably buddies again, right?
Yeah, it depends on who you're dating.
Okay.
Then I might go that route.
Well,
no.
Yeah, all right. Steal my gal, now I'm punching you again. But you're just going to start it all over.
But to your point, that's how we would handle it.
Nobody
I agree.
knows how to throw a punch anymore.
Nah, they're all
violent. Everybody wants to bring a gun. Everybody wants to have a knife. It used to be, and granted, it was very common for us to respond to Kirkpatrick Holmes, the old KPs, or the flats as we call them.
KPs.
Yeah. And somebody be hit over the head with a brick. I mean, now
it's creative.
They don't hit each other with objects anymore or their fists. They shoot each other. And unfortunately, that's not going away anytime soon. Okay,
so let me give you the keys to the much bigger castle from the viewpoint of municipal leaders, not from a chief of police standpoint, from a mayor standpoint, from a political leader standpoint, from county board. If you could bundle it all up and start to implement a strategy. Now, it's going to require multiple strategies over a long period of time. But when you look at all of those things and considering what we've talked about, we're kind of accepting the reality of root cause and not just chalking it up to, well, that's your community or that's, I hate, when people say black on black crime.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
It's just crime. It's just crime.
It's like, stop. This is, Aristotle, right? Poverty is the father of all crime, or whatever the saying is.
I wasn't around. I didn't know the guy.
Yeah, I didn't really read it all either. What would you do? Like, if you could remove yourself exclusively from the worst of the worst, and you could kind of like, you know what? In my 25 years or however many years of total experience you have, I think that one of the paths of least resistance is youth programs. Is it jobs? Where would you start?
Again, I'm going to start with the SROs, but yes, youth programs is another thing. Granite City Police Department does a youth academy. A lot of local police departments do youth academies, and they bring kids in. They give them a inner circle tour of policing. They get to spend a week with the police in a non-confrontational, very laid back and fun environment. They do stuff with the kids. I know they go to Père Marquette, stuff like that. There's a day where they go out to the range, and they actually, under extremely close watch, allow them to shoot guns and educate them on firearms. I think the best way to try to at least mitigate the crimes that we have involving firearms is education and teaching. But the unfortunate thing is you can give them all the tools in the world. If it is not accepted by the household leaders of each of those kids, it's never going to fly. It's going to get cut down before it even begins to get off the ground. So reaching out to the kids, showing them that you're a human being.
See, I've always thought like the potential of law enforcement from a community engagement standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and I like everything that you're talking about. The one area that I think is kind of low-hanging fruit that is kind of, maybe more of a shock and awe approach would be the cause and effect. Kind of like, you personally in your current role as coroner, you always are part of the worst example of crime, right? Most kids know it exists. They know it happens. They in the news. They're all on their devices. They get to like watch the viral video of somebody getting shot, but they really don't see the crime. Is that too far? It's almost like you remember the kids that, back in the day, you get a DUI and you're forced to go to the coroner's office to see the dead body. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
These kids
they just call them station house adjustments.
These kids are all on Call of Duty 24/7. What would be the difference if, hey, parents, you're cool with this? Well, this is a real life version of Call of Duty. This is what we're going to do so that they can kind of understand it. Is that too far? Or am I too still Granite in my thinking?
No.
The
bad thing is...
Because I would send them.
You're speaking to me. So
Yeah, right.
I mean, that makes total sense to me. But trying to look at it objectively and taking a step back...
Too far?
No, well, I just don't know the feasibility of it, because there are a lot of kids out there. And getting the opportunity to try to work with each and every one of them in that kind of a setting would be very difficult. But something that I think would be great for their parents, especially the ones who don't like us and think, you see an officer who, it was an officer-involved shooting where the officer was later found at fault. Like, traffic stop, the guy reaches in his back pocket, pulls out a cell phone, the officer smokes him for whatever reason it may be. You're not in that place at that time. You don't know what's going through the officer's mind. You don't know what precipitated that. You don't know the events leading up to that exact moment. All we know is that a guy pulled a cell phone out and a cop killed him. Obviously, officers make decisions in split-second scenarios a lot. Well, one of the things that we have that's a tool for us is called Milo, and it is as close as you're going to get to virtual reality training, and it consists of traffic stops. You're on a domestic, and there are people, and it has screens that go all the way around you. You have a firearm, you have a taser, and it's all wired to this system so that if I were to pull the gun out and shoot, it will show me where my bullet hit on that screen. It'll show me if I hit a suspect or I missed a suspect, all of that kind of stuff. But it is scenario-based. It goes back to the thing we were talking about with stress inoculation, because it puts them in as live of a situation as they could possibly be in without the actual risk of being in the real live situation.
Yeah, because real bullets are bad.
Real bullets are bad. They hurt.
Yeah.
So we've had city leaders and some community business leaders. We did a citizen academy. And it was a 10-week academy on Wednesday nights where we brought them in. I think it was Wednesday nights. Anyway, we brought them in.
This is in Granite?
Yeah. And we ran them through basically a 4-hour a night, once a week police academy. And part of that was the Milo training. And what we did was we ran it first without giving them any training. We just took them in, said, here's your gun, here's your taser. Bad guys are going to be over there. Make your best decision that you can in this situation.
Yeah, don't fuck up.
Yeah. And you would be amazed how many civic leaders completely blew everybody away. So you go through all of the training, and then at the end of the training, they bring them back through. And when they bring them back through, they all did exponentially better. But it plays into the importance of training for one, but two, it also plays into the development of the mindset. And I think if some of these community leaders and parents or whoever feel some kind of way negatively about the police, that would be a perfect opportunity. Hey, we want to do something with you. So feel us out. Come with us and let's see. And then we're going to explain to you and train you and give you another opportunity to do it.
So I have a kind of a question / suggestion in hearing you describe it that way, because a couple things are going on in real time. Mm-hmm. There's an elevated distrust / hatred / whatever word you want to use against police from the general public, specifically center left. At the same time, there's an elevated outward approach by law enforcement to align center right. And I think that's a natural response to the Newton's third law theory, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody likes to be hated, and if you are, you want to hate back. We're tribal in nature. Exactly. And I think that this argument is occurring primarily because the vast majority of communities do have, similar to what Granite City has for the most part, a good relationship horizontally between first responders and the community in schools, because those people live in the community, right? They're part of it. But where we really see the angst tends to be derived from the political sphere, because never in our lifetime, not since really 2015-16, and when Trump came down that escalator. And I'm a poli-sci guy. That is my degree. That is my my educational background and interest. I've never seen it like this. And even reading, history, even Civil War. I mean, it's different now. And I think that due to social media, due to just kind of like the ability to quote engage is too easy. So here's where I'm going with this. We all want judges as part of the law and order system to be apolitical, right? They should be neutral. They should just abide by the law. Do you think that the police community in particular should do a better job potentially of separating from political ideology, political affiliation? Because you've seen it and you know what I'm talking about, whether it's a sheriff's race or whatever.
Coroner's race.
Where
it's political.
Where somebody has to say, well, okay, you're running, but are you a Republican or a Democrat? And there's those that are running are quicker to say, well, I'm a Republican, or fewer are saying I'm a Democrat when it comes to law. Do you think that there should be a push to remove that tag and train to be more apolitical because of the natural response for the blue team to hate the red team? And if you see a group of people in an institution such as Law and Order be affiliated with the red team, that's going to, by default, create distrust and, to a point, hatred.
So, as a police officer, we are supposed to be apolitical. I mean, you get to vote the way you want to. You still have your First Amendment.
Supposed to be.
Well, but hear me out.
No. Listen, I'm on board. I get it.
I'll make it there. I promise I'll get you to the finish line. But as a police officer, you're supposed to act apolitical. Religion is not supposed to come into any play. Your own personal bias, because they say justice is blind. You are supposed to be blind to all of those variables when you go into somebody's house and you're dealing with a situation. You're supposed to deal with that situation, the two individuals in that moment. Take all of the ancillary outside distractions out of the equation and just deal with that moment.
Right.
You're really good cops. Do that. There are a handful that, like I said, there's over 700,000. Not all of them can be rock stars. I'm sorry. They're not all, they don't all get afforded the same opportunities.
And they're all protected by the First Amendment.
Yes. That's where I'm going with this. Every single one of them has a First Amendment right because they're still a citizen of the United States. So as a police chief, we had a rule that you can pretty much say whatever you want on social media as long as it doesn't relate to the police department. If somebody says something negative about the police department, we don't want you weighing in and pretending like you're our resident expert,
right,
and that you speak for us as a whole. That was my job. That was my assistant chief's job. We dealt with that stuff. So we would make a hard, fast rule, and it was actually in the policy that said, hey, look, you can say whatever you want except for the police department. And that was a management's right. That was a management right thing, that we could pull that off. But beyond that, I mean, you can't tell people, you know, hey, don't talk about God, and you better not, put Trump 2024 on your Facebook page. We couldn't tell them that stuff. It just is.
Well, just let me just ask you, just fundamentally, would it make sense not to do it, but to maybe like subtly, like, hey, let's all turn the volume down here a little bit.
So that does happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you've only got a handful. You got to remember, again, this goes back to, you're dealing with a large population, but it only happens with a handful. If every one of those cops talked about their political ideologies or their religious beliefs on social media on a regular basis, Facebook might crash.
Yeah, meltdown.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where there's a small facet of the community that has the loudest voice, and that they do push a bit of a narrative out there. But they're, again, coming back to what you were saying, they are also feeling some kind of way like they're being attacked. So, I don't fault them, because what a person does in their private life is none of my business, as long as it doesn't affect the organization as a whole, and as long as they're not using their platform to attack somebody, socially, physically, in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
Then I really don't have a dog in that fight. I don't have any skin in that game. So
does it wear you out though?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes, and it's one of those things where you accept it for what it is. Again, through the years, I have been in situations. I have talked to people. I have dealt with people that I had a polarizing disagreement with internally, but externally, I was getting the job done. Case in point, when you're dealing with pedophiles and you've got to sit in a room and interview them,
yeah,
and you've got to try to relate to them and try to get into their head and understand the way that they think.
Right.
When in your gut, you're thinking you are the biggest scumbag on the planet and you don't deserve to live another day. But you can't do that. You've got to put the other hat on. You've got to be a professional. You've got to do you got to do your job. Try to get the confession. Try to get as much evidence as you possibly can, so that you can get this person convicted and they can never hurt another person again. You got to remember, there's a bigger picture on the other side. What you're feeling in that moment could change the pathway or the life of. It could literally alter the life of everybody that person comes in contact with, if they're allowed to go free from then on.
Yep.
You can stop it right there by being a professional and taking all of your own bias out of the equation.
So before we wrap up here, let's go back to the beginning. Let's see here. You graduated 95?
Yep.
95. 4 years college, right? McKendree, where'd you go?
Yeah. I have a bachelor's from McKendree, and then I have a master's from Lindenwood.
And you graduated in 99?
I had a little fun. I graduated in 2000.
2000, okay.
Drug my feet a little, but I also worked the whole time I was in college. And
So let's go back to graduation day. A true Rod Stewart moment, right? If I wish I knew now what I should have known then, would you do it all over again?
Yes, I would. Even in this political climate, yeah, I would. And I'll tell you why I would. We just had it happen here recently. Came in contact with somebody who I hadn't thought about in years, but because I was working that night and responded to a scene, that person is still alive. And not only are they still alive, they're thriving. They're living in Europe with their family, sending beautiful pictures on social media. And you got to think, if I wasn't there in that moment, yeah, somebody else could have been there. Would they have reacted the same way I did? You would hope. But what if they didn't? Now we've lost a beautiful person in this world that didn't get to go on, live their life the way that they're living it, which I got to be honest, I'm jealous of. So you look at it from that perspective is, who did I affect?
I wonder about this often, and this will be my closing question for you, because I view, this particular, what you're describing, this is a law of averages, right? For individuals that are in sales, everybody talks about the rule of, the 333, 300 people, 30 answer and only 3 agree to buy, or whatever it is, right? There's a massive failure rate within the industry that is sales. You're told no 97, 98, 99% of the time. And in your world, you are a first responder to, generally speaking, a similar percentage of, quote, failures, that being somebody's beaten or raped or dead or worse, right? So when you are able to circumvent the worst, it's a small percentage of that. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you now, in so much that 1 or 2%, those success stories, are they big enough to buoy you to, again, reflect and be like, I would do it all over again?
In my case, yes. I had a conversation with my dad many, many, many years ago, and we were talking, and at the time I was not sleeping. I've battled insomnia most of my adult life. Is it caused by the job? Maybe. I mean, I worked midnights for 11 years of my career. It doesn't exactly create an environment for great sleep anyway. But we were talking, and I said, I lose sleep over this more than anything. I lose sleep over situations that I couldn't save, people I couldn't save. I lose more sleep over a criminal beating the system and getting away when you know they did it, because it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Yeah, and they're better and better by the day.
Oh, man. So I used to lose a lot of sleep over things like that. I would reflect on, man, I could have handled this differently. I could have gone, if I'd have just did this, then maybe that person. And you can what if yourself to death. And if you genuinely give a shit about this job, which I would argue that the vast majority of cops that are out there are still in it for all the right reasons and do genuinely give a shit about their communities, their citizens. Sure. And they're doing the right thing. There is a handful of morons, but it's, again, a numbers game. It's inevitable. There's going to be...
That's called society.
Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be a pile of shit somewhere. So anybody that I think you ask, anybody who genuinely gives a shit about the career that they have chosen and the profession that they have chosen will say something similar to what I just said. When you come across the guy with the bedazzled jeans and the Punisher sticker who's just like, hey, man, I got this really cool new T-shirt, see it? And it says police all over it. It's like, everybody knows you're the cops. Why,
Yeah, so that dude's definitely undercover.
Yeah, right. Super secret squirrel shit. But, you just want to pull them aside and go, why? You don't have to advertise what you do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do plumbers walk around in T-shirts that say plumber? I don't know.
I know some that wear a T-shirt that say, we lay good pipe.
Yeah. Electricians will check your shorts and put juice in your box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
screw
always
all
come
those
up with
people.
fun stuff.
Whatever. I got to come up with one for podcaster. I don't know what that would be.
I'll think about it.
Yeah,
I'll get back to you
yeah.
later. See if I can come up with something snarky.
Yeah, if you're listening and you got an idea, man, just text it my way. I'll pay you points.
Yeah, right.
Nick Novacich, dude, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you opening up because this is the world that you live in. I'll be honest. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough of you types.
Use guys
that, you know, I get it. I get it because the one thing I always go back to, I don't have the mental fortitude to, in hindsight, like, JB, would you have ever been a cop? No, because I wouldn't let go. I know in me, I don't have that bone, you know, and I think that, you know, to do what you do and be able to, maybe not necessarily let go completely, but to be able to adjust and to improve,
keep moving forward.
and most importantly, and this is what we talked about pre-mic, I do commend you in particular. I know that you have empathy, and I know that it operates near the frontal lobe. You know, and it's part of your decision-making process. And I think for those that are listening or potentially listening that are also first responders, I hope that you reflect and think about what that means, because the population that you're serving and the people that you are close to, they kind of want you to be a nice guy. They kind of need you to be a nice guy.
Absolutely.
So,
no, thank you for
kudos to you.
too.
Thank you for your service, man. Let me start there.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
And in exchange, I will buy you an O'Connell's burger, man.
Oh,
how's that sound?
I think that sounds fantastic.
We're out of here. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna boogie. Thank you for your time, dude. Thank you for your service. And for those of you that made it this far, like, review, follow, share. It's all free. It's all easy. Just a little click. Share it. And I will catch you next time. See ya.